I'm Jack Nixon, and I used to work here at Jacob Lake in 1942 to about 1949 during the summertime. Jacob Lake is a very interesting place. My Aunt Nina and Uncle Harold Bowman built this facility as a resting place and a refueling place for people that were going down to the north rim of the Grand Canyon. So to orient you just a little bit, this is Highway 89 that comes from Utah, or the closest Utah town is Kanab. There's a junction in the road here where you see that truck over there. That road over there goes to Flagstaff, Arizona, and down onto the Navajo Indian Reservation. 165 miles to the next town, which is Flagstaff. Then this road here, from this stop sign here, goes to the Grand Canyon, the north rim of the Grand Canyon. So this is a focal point, and there's no roads across the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon's 30, 40 miles wide in some places and 5,000 feet deep. So you can't build a road through there, and there's no elevators to take you down. So people have to go down and look at the Grand Canyon, and then they have to come back to this point. So my uncle and aunt, back in 1924, decided that this would be a place that would be, for the future, a great refueling station for cars that wanted to go down to the Grand Canyon and back, or cars coming from Arizona and going to Utah. So I'm standing right now where the first service station was built here. It was a small building made out of copper ore. The copper came from about 4 miles back here on the mountain where they had a copper ore mine. The copper ore is still, that rock is still in the lodge, which we're going to show a picture of a little bit later. And it's a green and blue color. The green is, the blue part is azurite, and the green part of the rock is malachite. I'm sorry. The azurite is the blue, and the green is the malachite. Beautiful rock. This service station was built out of the same kind of rock at that time. There were only 2 pumps here at the time. They were the old pumps that had a glass bowl up on top of them, and you could put 10 gallons in them by a hand pump that you pump out of a tank below ground to pump the gas up into the top of these tanks. And then by gravity, you would just open a lever, and the top number on that glass bowl was 10. That would be 10 gallon, and no, it was 1 on the top and 10 on the bottom. So as you let the gas come out, it would show how many gallons of gas you were dispensing. So that's how we told how much we charged for. 1 gallon, 2 gallons, 5 gallon. We'd let up on the lever, and that's how the gas was dispensed into the car. In those days, there were only 2 kinds of gas. There was ethyl gas and regular gas. Ethyl was the high test gas, which was probably at that time about 85, I'm guessing probably 85 octane. And regular gas was probably close to 81 octane, something like that. But for a 4-cylinder car, 81 octane was plenty to run it, and that's all the kind of cars they had in those days. So my Uncle Harold and Aunt Nina decided that this would be a good place to have a stopping place where people could go to the bathroom, or where people could get a sandwich, or where they could have an opportunity to fill their car up. And that's how Jacob Blake started out 85 years ago. I want to talk to you a little bit about a couple of experiences that I remember when I was here at 12, 13, 14, 15 years of age. Jacob Blake Inn Lodge is right over here, and they had a little post office in there, they had a sandwich counter and a little curio store that they sold Navajo jewelry, and then later rugs, and then later Indian pottery, and so on and so forth. It has grown to where they now hire 60 to 70 people during the summertime, college students mostly, to run this place. When I first came here, my aunt and uncle and a man named Uncle Billy, who used to have horses that he tied right over in this area here for tourists to take rides out onto the Kaibab forest. Uncle Billy, Aunt Nina, Uncle Harold, and myself were the only people that we had here to begin with. Aunt Nina would fix the food for people. Uncle Harold was in charge of everything. Uncle Billy handled the tourists that wanted to take horseback rides, and I ran the service station. It gives you a little bit of history. Today, we have a Chevron service station here with probably 12 pumps. We have a lodge that has been expanded significantly with a large gift shop, a restaurant, dining room. We have cabins, probably 60 or maybe 75, 80 rooms with a hotel in the back, and a lot of the original cabins, probably about 30 of the original cabins that have been built here over the last 85 years. I recall a family that used to run the copper mine, which is over this way about 5 miles. They lived in Colorado City in over near St. George, but they ran this copper mine, and they were a polygamous family, and the family name was Steed. They used to come and stop here to use the restroom on their way from Colorado City to the mine. Now, the restroom was right down here, where you see this this brick building. It was sitting about where the front of that building is, and the restroom was only a trench in the ground with a building built over the top of it, and then they had stalls. They had stalls for the women side, and just a urinal with a trough for the men. And interesting enough, this family, these Steed polygamous family, when they would come in a cattle truck, and they would stop right out here and let the end gate down on the cattle truck, and all these people, sometimes I think as many as 30 or 40 people would get off this cattle truck, walk down the ramp, and head for the restrooms. They didn't ever come over to the lodge and buy anything, but they wanted to use our rest stop here. Now, there was only I think it was a 6-holder, we called it, for the restroom. And this 6-holder deal was some 2x10 or 2x12 boards spread along on a bench type situation with holes cut in it for people to sit on and to go to the bathroom. And their droppings would just go into the trench down below, and you can imagine how it smelled, because we only cleaned that trench out maybe once a year. So there would be always more old grandmas and little kids and all types of people getting off this cattle truck, these polygamous family, and they would head for the restroom. The thing that used to bother my aunt and uncle is they didn't mind using our restroom as a stopping place, but they would never spend a dime in the store for anything, so we got a little revenue out of them. Anyway, I remember a statement that John Rich made. John Rich was here working, and he was dating Effie Dean, which was Uncle Harold and Aunt Nina's daughter. And Uncle Harold wanted to kind of get a good look at him, so he brought him up here and put him to work. And John and I became good friends. He was trying to make a good impression on the Bowman families because he wanted to marry their daughter. And he and I got to be really good friends, and it was his job to clean the latrine out occasionally, maybe twice a year at the most. And all that was a trench underneath these board seats that people would sit. And he came to me one day and he says, "Jack," he said, "You know, Jack," he says, "I went in to clean the restroom up after these people had all gone." And he said, "You know, Jack, I went in to clean the restroom up and clean it up after all these polygamous people had been using the restroom." And he said, "I was looking down in the trench," and he says, "I always thought that the stuff down in the trench was things that came from between people's legs, until I saw a teapot down there." He says, "I have no idea where that teapot came from." I've never forgotten that story. He was kind of a comic. I don't know whether he got the teapot out or how he got the teapot out. Anyway, that was where the restroom was for the public. And then, of course, each of the little cabins had their own bathrooms. And of course, there's some public bathrooms in the lodge. I want to tell you another story. This is during the war years. And during the war years, things were rationed. Nylon was rationed, tires were rationed, sugar, everything was rationed. And you had to get special permits. You had to get special permits to buy most things at that time, and because the war years, everything from 42 to 46, 45, everything went to the war effort, Second World War. So we couldn't get tires. The rubber factories and tire plants were making tires for Jeeps and for military vehicles. All automobiles were terminated. The automobile manufacturers were making Jeeps and half-tracks and trucks to transport military soldiers and equipment and so on in the war effort. And so during that time, when a tire would wear out and get down threadbare and a blowout, and they were made out of rayon cords in those days, and so they would blow out. And here you'd have a tire that was nearly worn out with a big hole in it, and people had could not buy a new tire. So they developed what they called an inner liner, which was a strip of rubberized nylon or a rayon cord that you could put inside of a tire, and then you had an inner tube that went inside of the liner, and you could keep wearing that worn out tire out until it was totally threadbare. So that was the things we dealt with the tourists that came along. If they'd blow a tire out along the road someplace, we'd just put an inner liner in, give them a new inner tube, pump it up, and send them on their way. Gasoline was rationed in those days also, and we could only sell gasoline to people that had a stamp. Now, there were 3 kinds of stamps. There was an A stamp, B stamp, and a C stamp. An A stamp would allow you to buy 3 gallon a week. A B stamp would allow you to buy 4 gallon a week. And a C stamp allow you to have 5 gallons a week. And you would get your stamps based upon what your occupation was. If you were a doctor, you would get you'd get a C stamp or a 5 gallon one, because doctors were emergency and specialty type of a use. Now the farmers could have all the gas they wanted because they raised grain and hay and so on, but they would, anytime that a farmer bought gasoline, he couldn't use it in his truck or in his car. He had to put it in equipment. And the way they solved that problem so that people wouldn't buy agricultural gasoline and put in their cars, the cars were rationed, but for the equipment that they used, they colored it purple. They put a dye in the gasoline. And so anytime a farmer would put some of his agricultural gas in a car, it would turn the carburetor purple. And that way they prevented people from using unrestricted gasoline in their own personal cars. When we sold a gallon or 3 gallon or 5 gallon of gas, we had to collect their A stamp or B stamp or C stamp, because we had to turn those stamps in when we bought gas from the supplier. And we used to buy gas in 7,000 gallon tanks, truck tanks. And so my Uncle Harold, was very creative, and he put 3 large 7,500 gallon tanks down over the hill here a little bit, where the sun shined on them all day long. There was no trees around. Well, the heat from the sun expanded the gas to where he'd get about 8,000 gallon for every 7,500 gallon tanker that he bought gas from, because the heat would warm up the gas, and then we'd pump the gas up from down over the hill and put it in a very small tank, 1,000 gallon tank. About right here was the regular one, and about right over there was the ethyl tank. It was my job to keep these tanks full of gas for the people that pulled into the service station and gas up. And it took about 30 minutes for us to pump the gas from down over the hill in the big tanks up to the small tanks. And that became kind of monotonous for me, and so one day I thought, it's going to take 30 minutes. I turned the switch on to pump the gas up here, and it was the ethyl gas that I was pumping, the most expensive. And I thought, I'm just going to take a nap for about 20 minutes, and I'll wake up and then catch it before it fills up. My bunk was right behind the service station. My bunk was about right over there, and the gas pumps were right out here, and the underground tanks were right about there. Well, I went in on my bunk and took a nap, and I didn't wake up. I forgot. Somebody was knocking on my door, banging on it, and says, "Anybody in there? Anybody here? There's gas going all over hell out here." Boy, I came off that bunk. I knew exactly what had happened. I thought, oh my golly, this is terrible. I turned the switch off to the pump, and I looked out, and there was gas all out over this parking lot area, and the fumes were just coming up like this. And I immediately knew that my life was over. I don't know how many hundreds of gallons of gas had run over the tank, and it was just running down across the parking lot. At that time it was all gravel, so it was just soaking into the ground. But I could tell that it was a lot. And I thought, my uncle's going to kill me. I don't know what to do. I shut off the gas, and I had built a little tree house about a quarter of a mile back down this way towards Kanab, and nobody really knew where that was except me, and that was my only point of shelter that I could think of. And so I took off and crawled up on a tree, up into my tree house, and I could hear my uncle out here hollering, Jackie, where are you?" And I was so scared that I just laid down on the floor of the tree house, hoping that he couldn't see me, but he didn't even know where it was. So I thought, I can't answer him. My life is done. I just want to prolong it as long as I can. And I thought, I'll wait till night when it's dark. And I had a new pair of cowboy boots in my bunk here. And I thought, I'll walk all night long to Fredonia through the forest, but I don't want to leave without my new boots. So I thought, when it gets dark enough, I'll sneak back to my bunk and I'll get my boots, and then I'll take off and I'll walk all night to Utah. It's the only way I could think I could survive. So when it got dark, I came back up behind the lodge and came around here and was just going to go in the door where my bunk was. And who do you think is standing there with these arms folded like this? My uncle. I could have died at that moment. I wanted to be gone. I didn't want to live. I wanted to be gone. Well, what he did, I will never forget. I thought that I was done. He looked at me and he said, "I thought I'd hired a man, and all I got was a damn kid." And he turned around and walked back into his office. That hurt me more than a licking would have hurt, because I disappointed him. I felt that I had a good relationship, but now I knew that was gone. When it came time to settle up at the end of the year, which we settled up when I had to go back to school, he sat down in the office and he says, "Jack, you've cost me a whole lot more than you're worth. You realize how much I've lost on you?" And I said, "Yes, sir. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He says, you're not going to get paid this year. The only thing you can do is if you want to go over and to the curio store and pick out a piece of jewelry, you can have that as a remembrance of your year's wages. So I did. I walked over and I picked up a bracelet, which I still wear today. I've worn this bracelet for about 65, 68 years, something like that, nearly every day of my life, to remind me not to go to sleep at the switch. And that's a great reminder, and it's helped me for many years to remember that occasion. And that when I'm hired to do a job, I have to do the job, and I don't do other things like take naps. So that was a great experience to have had, and I'm thankful for it. And Uncle Harold hired me back next year, and I came back and I didn't ever go to sleep with the switch again. This bracelet was marked $12.75. It was a palm bracelet. Palm jewelry is jewelry that is over 100 years of age.
I love you.
This bracelet today, I don't know what it's worth. It's over 200 years old. I've had it for, well, I'm 90, I guess. So I've had it for 68 years. Today, it would be worth well over $2,000. And I'm trying to wear it out, trying to live long enough that I can wear it out. I'm 90 years old right now. At any rate, this was a wonderful experience that I had here at Jucket Lake. The Steed family using our restrooms and not paying us anything, not even buying candy or ice cream or anything. They never spent a dime here, but every time they would bring a truckload of people to work at the mines, they'd use our restrooms. The only thing we got out of it, I guess, is a tea kettle. And I'm not sure whether we ever used that back in the kitchen or not. I don't know what happened to the tea kettle. Anyway, and then this experience of going to sleep on the job, thinking I was going to die any day, any moment, once Uncle Harold found me, hiding from him in the forest, planning to walk all the way to Utah, hoping to stay alive a little longer. Him catching me at the door because I had to have those cowboy boots before I left. Having the great experience of being trained and being taught by a wonderful man like Harold Bowman and Aunt Nina. Sorry, I still get choked up when I think about them. So that's my story about the service station, which I was in charge of the year I was 12 years of age. Now I've got grandkids that I wouldn't put in charge of my kitchen. And here I was running the station, collecting money from people, fixing tires, putting inner liners in worn out tires, collecting stamps that I had to turn into the government when we bought more gas. I don't know. I've missed the boat in training my kids the way I was trained.